Hey Sunrise, it's Andrew here with this week's small group questions as we now transition into Romans 13. And so we're going to deal with this idea of submission to authority and how does that work itself out in the Christian life. So the first question, why is this text so important to living out the faith? Why is it important that we have biblical instructions on this topic? So that's the first thing. The second thing, how does the context of who Paul's writing to, the Roman church living in the day of the Roman Empire, how does that setting help us to understand the reality and urgency of what Paul is saying, especially in light of some of the things that have happened in Rome leading up to this time, such as the expulsion of the Jews for a period of time? How do these different events help us to further appreciate and get a greater understanding of what Paul is saying in chapter 13, especially in 1 through 4. And these things begin to give us some ideas of how we live it out in an American mindset. Again, as we apply these truths to our situations, it'd be one of my questions, like how does verses 1 through 4, strike you? What's the first things that come to mind when you hear these words of Paul? Is it acceptance? Is it admiration? Does it push you? Does it push against your natural tendencies? How does this fit with other teachings on this topic throughout Scripture? So how does this fit within what First Peter will tell us about honoring the emperor and submission in those ways? How does that connect again, even how we see in Acts when it comes to preaching the gospel and the authority in that realm? So Acts 4 is always an interesting point to put in here on that idea of the gospel. How does the gospel and submission work itself out in these ways? And ultimately, we talk about this, we see this, all authority comes from God. Why is that an important part for us to rest in? Again, especially going back to the end of chapter 12 and how blessing and not cursing our enemies that persecute us, how does this directly connect to those truths that we saw back in chapter 12? So what is Paul's big argument here that we are to rest in ultimately in doing these things? So in submission, in blessing, not cursing, what is ultimately this showing the world? And what is it teaching us as well? Those are just a couple of things to dive into this week. Of course, there's more that you can pull out of these 4 verses. So hopefully you'll spend some time in these truths. Come join us Sunday morning in worship as we hear this passage unraveled before us so that we can take it in and let the Spirit do its work in us. And then again, come to small groups this week with questions to kind of work deeper and deeper into this text and allow the Lord to speak to us through his word, applying it to our hearts and to our minds that we can live the life well. Hope to see you guys on Sunday. Have a great week.